And we continue at 2:06 in the afternoon. It's the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in Culver City.
John, a new poll just came out from Emerson College showing that if she wanted to run for governor, Kamala Harris would have 31% support, followed by Katie Porter with 8%, and scrub-a-dub-dub Javier Baccaria is at 2%.
For a guy who was a statewide constitutional office holder, a secretary of Health and Human Services, and a congressman for decades, that's pathetic.
He probably just didn't scrub hard enough.
Scrub it.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is an expert on China and author of the book, The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. Both books available online at Amazon.com or at your favorite bookstore. You can get them online at GordonChang.com or follow him on X at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon Chang, welcome.
Thank you so much, John.
Well, President Trump campaigned hard on the platform of balancing out our trade relations with other countries. He certainly has made that a centerpiece of his second term as president. And it seems like many of the nations around the globe are willing to come to the table and work with him to try to figure out how to make things fairer. One country that has postured very aggressively against him and has not been willing to come to the table so far is the country of China. It seems like all of the countries on planet Earth are going one way, and while they're zigging, China is zagging. What do you make of this disparity, and where do you see things going?
Well, Xi Jinping has essentially configured the Chinese political system so that only the most hostile answers are considered acceptable. Now, for him, he's got an export-dependent economy. He really has no practical choice but to call the White House, but he can't do it because he boxed himself in, which means a couple things. First of all, he could take China off the cliff. That's entirely possible. His hero, Mao Zedong, did that, by the way. Or he could be the last in line to settle a trade dispute with the United States, in which case he's going to get the worst deal, which means that essentially Trump will be successful in reordering the global trade system. Now, Xi Jinping can stop Trump from doing that, but as I said, Xi Jinping won't stop Trump. So I'm afraid that China is going to be in a very difficult place going forward.
Let's say that it's worst case scenario for him. Let's say that he does not cut a deal and China finds it very difficult to sell their goods on the global market. That's going to create all kinds of economic conflict within their own borders. What kind of political pressure in a country that is not a democracy can be put on him?
Well, he can lose his power at any time. You know, we often say, well, Americans have a short-term time frame because we got elections every 2 years, presidential elections every 4. But Xi Jinping has an election every day. And although he has what's called a fixed term as General Party Secretary of the Communist Party, it doesn't really matter. He has broken all the rules. There are no rules, which means that he's got to worry about surviving each and every day that goes forward.
Now, you mentioned that they break all the rules, and they do this whether it comes to child labor or intellectual property, manipulating currency, those sorts of things. If he were to cut a deal with Trump and the United States, I would imagine that that party will be coming to an end.
Well, we'd like to think so, but I don't think the Communist Party can actually honor any deal which substantially changes the Chinese economic structure, which is built on predatory trade practices, which is built on intellectual property theft, which is criminal. They tried in January 2020 with the so-called Phase 1 trade deal that President Trump signed, where there were purchase commitments on the part of the Chinese. But they violated even those. So if they can't even honor those types of commitments, I don't see what kind of deal Xi Jinping can actually sign and honor. So I'm not sure that getting to a trade deal is going to be good for us. It would be good for Xi Jinping because he's not going to follow it, but not good for us.
China is obviously a very large country and has substantial rural and agricultural aspects of their economy. Many of those people were taken away from their homes out of rural China and put in big cities and were placed in factories, and they're working in the industrial sector now. And they were told that this is the future, this is where the government wants you to live, this is where the government wants you to work, and that's just the way it is. Many of those people are fishes out of water, where you take someone who lives in a certain sort of place and you put them in a big city, and that's a culture shock to them. I guess as long as the job is there and you can pay your bills, everything's fine. But if you were displaced by your own government and then told you were being displaced because this is where the jobs are, and then there's no jobs there, then you're not living in the place you want to live in and you're not working. I would imagine the anger that is going to swell up with people exactly like that is going to be huge in a place like China.
Yes, and factories are closing, especially in the export-dependent southern portions of the country. And that means people are going back to their hometowns. And that means after being displaced, they're going back to something familiar, but the question is, do they have a livelihood back there? And in addition, even before this tariff war, you had the most privileged segment of the Chinese society, young kids out of school with the greatest jobs. They were having trouble finding work, and they were so-called retiring, quote unquote. That means going to farm. And that is a sign of economic failure. But now it's worse because you've got the tariff war. President Trump, with his 145% tariffs, 245% in the case of some goods, is essentially taking the Chinese economy and saying, no, we're not going to take your exports. So an export-dependent economy which can't export is not an economy.
Public opinion polls are taken on a daily basis here in the United States. Trump's approval, Trump's disapproval, Congress, potential candidates for the presidency and future elections, those sorts of things. We kind of have a CNBC running ticker of people's popularity or unpopularity. In China, it's not really necessary because there are no elections. But if you were to conduct a public opinion survey in China right now about the direction of their economy, about the faith that they have in their own government, the approval or disapproval they have in their own government, where do you think it would be right now?
Approval would be somewhere between 10 and 20%, if they're lucky. But of course, as you point out, they don't. First of all, you can't take a poll like that because on a sensitive issue, but also they don't do that, and they use repression to keep people in line. And that would, and if you had a poll like that, it would really be fascinating to see how it comes out. But I think most people, especially having gone through the COVID lockdowns, which were extremely unpopular, and not having a bounce back after COVID, I think it would be very, very low approval rating.
Let's step away from the economic aspect of this for a second and talk about national security. A friend of mine lives in Washington, D.C., and was having dinner with some people who work in the military, some of the people who are high-ranking in that regard. And they were talking about where they thought that China was and how that related to the military defense preparedness in the United States in terms of a potential conflict with China. And they basically said, look, here's the deal. Future warfare is not going to look like World War II. It's going to look like Star Wars. You're not going to see pilots in planes as much as you're going to see drones. You're going to see technology used at levels that we've never seen before in warfare. And if we ever were engaged in a war with China, the country that can build the most drones and have the most advanced technology will likely be the country that wins a hot war if that were to happen. Right now, we purchase technology. We purchase goods like drones from China. We don't produce a lot of those things on our own. And if suddenly we are across the table from China, or we're on the other side of the fence as China, and we're engaged in a conflict with China, of course they're not going to sell us those materials. We're either going to be able to make them, or they're going to be able to overpower us. And they believe that it is important to bring the manufacturing of goods like drones and other goods that you would need if there were to be an international conflict back home, so we can build our own war tools and not have to rely on buying them from someplace else, because the moment we went to war with China, they'd cut us off.
Yeah, I think that's probably, well, they certainly would cut us off. The question, who would win? And that really involves a couple of things. First of all, in space, who takes down whose assets? I think that would be critical. Because you can have drones, but if you don't have satellites, it may not be that useful. Also, we've got a question of the Chinese saboteurs on our soil. You're in California, Reedley, California, in December 2022. An alert building inspector found what looks like basically a Chinese biological weapons lab, which had at least 20 pathogens, many of them deadly, and almost 1,000 mice that have been genetically engineered to spread disease. Although China has a weaker military on balance, they could actually win if they were able to spread, for instance, a disease among the American population and kill large portions of us. So this is a very, very difficult situation for us, because we're not taking the Chinese threat seriously. We are watching the Chinese mobilize not only their military, but their civilian society. But we're a society that thinks it's at peace, and we're not moving with the requisite speed and determination to protect ourselves. So there are so many different threats that we're not dealing with. And when you're taking apart, for instance, the Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services, I worry about pandemic preparedness.
You said that we're not taking China seriously enough. Some countries that are, clearly, are Japan, South Korea, certainly in Taiwan, they have a very close eye on what's going on in China. What are they saying right now as they look at this trade war going on between the United States and China?
Well, Japan is critical, because everyone was thinking that that was going to be the template trade deal. President Trump met the senior Japanese trade negotiator on Wednesday, said there was big progress, quote unquote, but the Japanese team is going back to Tokyo without a deal. Now, they say they're going to negotiate again this month, so that's really important. I think people are focused on trade right now, not on security. But the problem for China is that although it needs to stitch up trade deals with everybody, it's also threatening everybody's country, including Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and the others that you mentioned. So China is in a problem in that today's issue, trade, I don't think it can make very much progress. Even if Trump were not able to stitch up trade deals, China, I don't think, would be able to make any headway that of any substantial nature.
I'm going to ask you to put your domestic hat on here for a second, because you and I had a conversation some time ago when then Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi decided to take a delegation with her by plane to Taiwan against the wishes of the CCP, against the wishes of the Biden administration. She, of course, has been a longtime critic of the Chinese government. She has advocated for trade sanctions against them. She did not want them to be part of the World Trade Organization, did not want them to get most favored nations. And when you read her book that just came out about power, the longest chapter in her book was about China. And, you know, she makes it very clear what she thinks about them. And many of the policies that she advocated for, particularly in terms of trade, very much match up with what President Trump is doing right now. Yet she continues to be a partisan critic of him and his administration. Are you surprised that for China critics within the Democratic Party, like Nancy Pelosi, this wasn't an opportunity for bipartisanship, considering he's giving her a lot of what she's been asking for?
I'm not surprised, but I'm sorely disappointed. As a base matter, I think that Speaker Pelosi, if the United States had listened to Nancy Pelosi when she was in the House in the 1990s, we'd be in much better shape than we are today. She has had the right ideas about China, but in this moment, I think her partisanship has overwhelmed her better instincts. And shame on her for that, because she should be an American first rather than a Democrat first. One could say to President Trump, you've got to stop the partisan rhetoric himself, and that's true as well. But right now, we need political leaders who put our country first, because we could lose our country. I know Americans don't think so, but we are oblivious to what our enemies say and do. I mean, for instance, we couldn't have cared less that Osama bin Laden killed 6 people at the World Trade Center in 1993. We just ignored him until one day, 2001, he killed 2,977 Americans. Well, China is so much more powerful and can kill so many more Americans on a single day than Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda could. So we need to have political leaders who just cut it out and start defending us instead of indulging in their worst instincts.
Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China and The Great U.S.-China Tech War, both books available online at Amazon.com. You can find Gordon online at GordonChang.com and follow him on X at Gordon G. Chang. Gordon, thank you so much for stopping by. Always a pleasure.
Oh, well, thank you, John. I really appreciate it.
And as we approach the end of the show, Randy, if you want to continue listening to us after we sign off at 3, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is search for The John Phillips Show wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Apple Podcasts, iHeart, Spotify. Search for The John Phillips Show. Hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can listen to these podcasts when you're doing anything, while you're working, while you're at the gym, or while you're eating an entire bowl full of pistachios.
Pistachios.
As Randy mentioned earlier, there's a new poll out to see who's going to be the next governor of the state of California. And inexplicably, if that poll is correct and the election were today, we would end up on the November ballot with a choice between Kamala Harris and Katie Porter.
Oh, boy. If that happens, I'm going Katie Porter.
Please.
That's like one of those conversations that you have when you're on a really long flight and you've exhausted all of the interesting conversation that you can have, and then you say, if you're getting robbed, would you rather be shot in the head or the chest?
I will repeat myself.
Well, the field is not yet gelled. There will be candidates who end up dropping out, and there will be new candidates who end up coming in. One of the individuals rumored to be kicking tires on a run for governor is a man you used to watch on the Fox News Channel and currently watch, but on weekends he had his own show for a long time. He's also the host of his own podcast, and he's also the founder of Golden Together. You can get him online at goldentogether.com, and you can follow him on X at Steve Hilton X. Steve Hilton, welcome.
I just burst out laughing when I heard that. Kamala Harris versus Katie Porter. There's no way that's going to happen. It's just too insulting. It's too insulting to every Californian and to this great state to have a choice between these total clowns. I mean, it's just a joke. I mean, I often say, John, the problem with California is we've been run by idiots and ideologues. I think that was a pretty, perfect description of that pair.
Oh, if we end up with a choice between Kamala Harris and Katie Porter, it doesn't matter if we ever get the big one. We're falling into the ocean.
Yeah, it's a life or death situation at that point. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It's not going to happen. There's going to be a Republican. We're going to make sure of that. We need change, and everyone can see we need change. I mean, it's the campaign hasn't started, exactly as you said. The candidates aren't there, exactly as you said. I've been strongly considering running. I've been working on the policy front. I've been traveling the state. I've been doing all the things you need to do. And there is an event next week, which people may be interested in, listening right now. It's in Huntington Beach on Tuesday, the 22nd of April in the morning. And I'll be there. It's a special live event. That's all I'm saying.
And will you be making any big announcements at this event?
Well, I'm just leaving it out there, John, and telling people that if they care about the future of California, definitely come along. It's going to be a great event on the morning of Tuesday next week in Huntington Beach.
Now, you look at the problems that the state of California is facing, whether it's the insurance crisis, homelessness, crime, the budget, fire preparedness, water policy, you name it, we have a problem, and the problem needs to be addressed, or else the consequences are going to be severe, as we've seen with the fires here in Los Angeles. That being said, of the candidates who have declared already, including Katie Porter and Javier Becerra, they're running almost exclusively on federal issues. They're running against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
They have a lot to say about abortion. They have a lot to say about international policy, but they don't really have much to say in terms of any of the issues that would fall under their umbrella if they were to be elected governor. We've had an absentee landlord as governor of California with Gavin Newsom, who's been running for president for the last several years. If we end up with a governor after 8 years of Gavin Newsom who is bored to tears with those subjects, hasn't thought about them, has no solutions, and fundamentally doesn't care, I don't know if we can survive that.
I agree with you. I really strongly agree with you. I don't think that's overstating it. I think this is going to be a life or death election for California, because we cannot go on like this. We cannot continue with this one-party rule. I mean, I just put this book out that I wrote, Caliphalia, Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst-Run State. That's what we are right now, the worst-run state in the country. All the numbers back that up, the highest poverty rate, highest taxes, highest cost for housing, gas, electricity, water, everything, worst business climate, crime, homelessness, everything a disaster, right? So we can't go on like this. They have no clue how to solve these problems because they created these problems. How can they clean up the mess when they made it? That's why they're avoiding the issue. Although I have to say, some of the things they've been saying are just so laughable. They know they have to nod towards it. So I noticed Becerra when – actually, he's not Becerra. Let's give him his real name, the Joe Biden name, Javier Baccaria. That's how Joe Biden referred to him. So I'm going to call him Javier Baccaria, just like the President Biden did. So the thing is that he said, I noticed in one of his videos, he said, the problem is in California. The California dream isn't there anymore like it was for my parents. Yeah, and who destroyed it? You did, and your party, with your stupid policies. And then he goes on and says, we're going to deal with the affordability crisis. And to your point, they have absolutely no clue. It was the most unintentionally hilarious interview I've seen. It's the first TV interview, I think, that he did as a newly announced candidate with our friend Alex Michelson in LA. And Alex asked him it wasn't exactly a gotcha question. It was, so you say your top priority is tackling the affordability crisis. How are you going to do that? That was the question, which you'd think he'd had time to prepare for, or even knew the answer to without preparing. It was gibberish on a Kamala Harris scale. He said something like this: well, we're going to get some experts round a table and we're going to scrub it.
Scrub it.
I don't know what he meant. Scrub it. And we're going to... What did he say? And then what's left and survives and that's clean, we'll do that. Like, what is this? It's a joke. These people are such mediocrities. We cannot have this in California. We've got to do better than this.
Well, what is the impulse? What is the impulse for running for an office where you don't care about the issues that you'll have to deal with if you were to win that office? This would be like, if I can't stand the sight of blood, I educate myself to become a surgeon. There's no point in doing that if you don't have the skills, you don't have the intellectual curiosity, you don't have the ability or the interest. Why do you even go in that direction?
This is what you get from one-party rule. It just decays over time, and you get these complete machine politicians thrown up by the system whose only skill is navigating the system. And then the system kind of decides, it's this person's turn. And you particularly get this with the Democrats. Oh, yeah, he's been around a bit. Let's have him. And he says, okay, fine, I'll do it. And this is they have no skills. I mean, a great example of this is Karen Bass. And if you see, you probably talked about it, but it's such a powerful example for me of what we're dealing with here. This post she put out a week and a half ago, something like that, on the permitting in Los Angeles is unbelievable. She puts out this post and says, and the tweet, the post, what's written is this: I just signed an executive order streamlining permitting to rebuild LA. And you think, okay, fine, finally, I'm making 4 months too late, but whatever, that's good. But it's above a video of her at the event announcing this. And so I thought, well, I'll watch the video, do my research. So remember, the post says, I just signed an executive order streamlining, like as if something happened. What she actually said was, I just signed an executive order tasking agency heads with developing paths forward to streamlining. And you think, what is this? It's just total gobbledygook, bureaucratic, process-driven nonsense. These people are totally clueless about actually getting things done. And it's because they're just this machine, this party machine that churns out these people. All they're good at is sucking up to the party bosses and the unions, all the people they have to suck up to get ahead. And they have no skills in actually doing anything at all. That's why you end up with these complete non-entities as candidates.
Well, and then you end up with the stories like what we saw in Breitbart yesterday that say that the city of Los Angeles spends more money on homeless services than they do on fire protection. And you say to yourself, okay, who is it that the city works for? Do you work for the people who pay the bills, the homeowners, the people who are taxpayers, or do you work for the bums?
Well, exactly, and that's why, that's what we've ended up describing as the homeless industrial complex. They work for all the corrupt, hangers-on and non-profits, and the unions are all in the thick of it, and the cronies that get the money. It's all taxpayer money, our money. And that's why, by the way, it's so fantastic to see Bill O'Reilly swinging into action, his new appointment as U.S. Attorney, like the first thing he announced, this investigation into all of this, because it's an absolute scandal that they spend the money, our money, on all of this, feathering their own nests while the problem just gets worse.
Steve Hilton, founder of Golden Together, host of the Steve Hilton Show. You can get him online at goldentogether.com and follow him on X at Steve Hilton X. And Steve, the event is going to be in Huntington Beach next week?
Next Tuesday, April the 22nd, 10 a.m., Huntington Beach, right there by the pier. See you there.
All right. Well, we'll all be paying attention. Steve Hilton, everyone. Thank you so much for stopping by. Well, Randy, you and I spent our morning taking sexual harassment training.
Not for anything that we did. The company just has to do that every year.
Did any of that information take?
Of course it did. Whatever I have to say so I don't have to take that again.
Well, if you work for the government, you probably have a master's degree in sexual harassment and DEI training. And despite the fact that government workers have to take all of those courses, they still discriminate against each other right and left.
A employee of the county of San Diego is suing the county after he claims a supervisor discriminated against him. He says that he was passed over for a promotion because he wasn't minority enough. He's Asian, and apparently they were looking for a Latino or a black.
And they told him that.
For more, here is NBC7 in San Diego.
A former San Diego County official is taking legal action claiming discrimination and retaliation.
The defendants named in the lawsuit are former County Supervisor Board Chair Nora Vargas and current Board Vice Chair Tara Lawson-Remer. NBC7's Dave Summers has details of these.
She's the one that looks like she's strung out on drugs in every single picture.
NBC7's Dave Summers has details of these recently filed allegations.
Former Assistant Chief Administrative Officer Michael Vu thought he was a shoo-in for the chief's job after nearly 2 decades of working for the county. The lawsuit he filed last week indicates his own boss, Helen Robbins-Meyer, was lobbying for him. When it came to getting then board chair Nora Vargas' blessing, the lawsuit alleges Vargas told his boss she wanted a person of color.
Okay. Imagine, first of all, having that idea where there's a job that's open and you're only interested in candidates of a certain race. And then you're dumb enough to tell the people that you don't pick that they didn't get picked because they're not of the correct race.
To which Robbins-Meyer responded, Michael is a person of color. He's Asian.
Wrong one, pal.
The lawsuit indicates Vargas then said, "That doesn't count.
Oh, come on.
That doesn't count. They have opportunities in education. We need a Hispanic or black."
Wait, what does that mean? They have opportunities in education?
Okay, here's the larger issue right now. How did a woman with a room temperature IQ get to be chairman of the board of supervisors in San Diego County?
Low voter turnout. So, in the name of equity and inclusion, we need to make sure that we don't hire this Asian guy. We have to hire the Latinos or the blacks because they have less education. I'm really trying to figure out what exactly is going on here because it seems like the more anti-racist you're trying to be, the more racist you sound.
Yeah.
The lawsuit indicates Vargas then said, "That doesn't count. They have opportunities in education. We need a Hispanic or black."
That is quite a statement.
Before taking the oath, Vargas mysteriously resigned her position in December last year, citing safety concerns.
Nora?
Oh, this isn't going to go well. They're chasing her at home.
Oh, no, she's not going to like that.
Nora, we'd like to talk to you about this lawsuit.
Vargas ran into her Chula Vista home when we tried to ask her questions about these accusations.
Michael Vu claims you discriminated against him. Is that true?
There are no kings and queens. We are all equal.
Also defendant in the lawsuit, Vice Chairperson Tara Lawson-Remer, did not address it at the State of the County address Wednesday night. At tonight's State of the County address, Tara Lawson-Remer spoke at length about equity, diversity, providing a pathway for a better life.
Yeah, all that's nonsense.
Oh, I love the fact that the people who pat themselves on the back the most about all of that were the same people that said no Asians apply.
She condemned what she called the chaos and the corruption in Washington, yet she is accused of some of those very things in this lawsuit.
You're telling me a politician is two-faced?
I've got to tell you. The other one just sounds like it's stupidity. This one, you take one look at a photograph and you can realize that she's got other problems.
According to the court filing, Lawson-Remer is alleged to have agreed to supporting Vu if he hired Worley Group CEO Paul Worley as his assistant.
Boy, that sounds like corruption.
How is that legal? Okay, one of the classes that we had to take today was quid pro quo. Doesn't that sound like a textbook definition?
You learned something today.
Apparently so.
The document alleges in a private phone call, Lawson-Remer said she would vote for him, ensure there are 3 votes for him, if he agreed to make Paul Worley the assistant CAO. NBC7 reached out to Paul Worley before the address. His wife Nancy said, "This is not his fight. I don't want to comment. If he does, he'll call you back."
I love that this is a huge county in California, and it's as if it's Mayberry.
Neither Vargas or Lawson-Remer made themselves available to us for interviews, but according to the lawsuit, Nora Vargas said shortly after the complaint was made public, "The allegations made against me are not only false, but totally contradict my values and my record of public service."
Yeah, I don't think that's true. Otherwise, this guy would have a job instead of a lawsuit.
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty on brand for those two.